Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, folks. Michael Zuber, one rental at a time, back with his good friend of the channel, Mr. Greg Dickerson. Thanks again for being here on the 4th of July.
Yeah, man. Good to see you.
Awesome. Hey, one of the things I thought we should close with is just acknowledging that our economy is in for, good times never last, bad times never last. We are entering a bad cycle. And, acknowledging that, but also we need to realize that both you and I won't put words in your mouth, but I'm excited for what's to come. I've been here several times before. I've profited before, but I'm set up to profit even more this time. Are you excited for what's coming?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, obviously there's a lot of pain and there's a lot of bad things are going to happen to people through this cycle. And, obviously you're never excited about that, and if anybody out there has, lost their portfolio or, struggling or whatever, I mean, I'm not excited about that.
Correct.
But there are opportunities, and there always are opportunities, even for those individuals, because it's one of the best educations you're ever going to get. If you're down right now, this is when you learn the lessons. You don't learn them when you're up. Very people always forget, man, I hit a home run there, and they go on to the next thing.
Yeah.
Instead of just keep hitting home runs,
Yeah.
Whatever you did to hit that ball out of the park, keep doing it. But anyways, this is the time to learn. It's the time to really understand, be ready, because yes, on the other side of this, when everything resets, that's where your next opportunities will come. And it takes time. They don't happen overnight. I mean, we've gone back and talked about markets, after 2008-9, it took what was it, 14 years for the markets to recover. It took the housing market basically 10 years to get back to where prices were, before the 2004, 2005 peak. So it takes time a lot of times for these things to reset and recover. The difference is what we had that's very interesting, that'll be interesting to see how this plays out moving forward, was the Fed. And what they did in 08-09 and stepping in. And it was they did that same amount over a 10-15 year period in, basically 18 months during the pandemic. So it'll be interesting to see what and if there's anything they can do once we bottom out here everywhere, because, housing's resetting, markets are still resetting. We still have CPI coming out next week in the Fed response. So we arguably have another leg down, before we can start looking for any signs of inflation plateauing and maybe starting to come down where the Fed can, slow down. A lot of people are calling for Fed reversal and pivoting. And, Kathy Wood seems more and more desperate each week when she's putting her videos out about the Fed and what they're doing. And, it's really interesting. So that's the whole, thing there that, the thing to watch is inflation and the Fed. And if the Fed can reverse or pivot, man, we're gonna have a big bounce real quick. So yeah, there'll be a lot of opportunities if you're watching the right things at the right time and you learn from what's going on right now.
Yeah. Let's talk about the Fed a little bit. Never know where these conversations are going to go. And that's something I've been thinking a lot about. And you are so right. There are, I would argue or guess, more than 50% of my audience believe that the Fed will pivot this year. And let's be clear.
Maybe let's make that video number 4.
Okay. All right. Let's make that.
Like you were talking about, looking for video number 4. Maybe let's talk about a Fed pivot video number 4. And
awesome. We'll save that for video.
Keep this on the theme of opportunities.
Thank you. You're so good at this. Thank you very much. So yeah, staying on the opportunity. One of the things, again, that you've taught me is, again, this recession will bring opportunities that I may not have been looking for, right? My first go around was stocks. My second go around was housing. And you've said, Michael, one of the best opportunities is going to be to buy a business. Not only can you buy a business for a discount, business that's already operating, perhaps a restaurant with inventory, but you can get terms. And just paint the vision again, folks. If you want an opportunity, you have that entrepreneur streak, a recession is a great time to start a business. Airbnb, Amazon, all these lots of amazing businesses were started in a deep, dark recession.
Yeah. And even businesses, like for people that watch your channel, I'm sure they've noticed your thumbnails all of a sudden, are looking really sharp, and,
it's amazing what money will do.
What's that?
It's amazing what happens when you spend money.
Yeah. So, you've hired somebody to do that for you and handle your video editing, your uploading, your thumbnails and all that. So what's interesting is I noticed it and I'm like, hey, who are you using? I'd like somebody to kind of do some video, chop my stuff up, make shorts and things like that. I don't do the thumbnails. I don't do any editing. My stuff's live, unfiltered, and you get what you get, If I get tongue twisted, I get tongue twisted, whatever. But anyways, I still wanted somebody to repurpose my longer form content and put out in short form videos on the other channels. So I asked you who was doing it, and you introduced me to, Marco. And what's funny is he told me, I don't even know if you know this. He said, you inspired me and my wife watching you and Michael. We created this business because of you saying, talking about entrepreneurship and getting out, starting your own business and doing that. And they left their full-time careers, started that business because of what you and I are doing.
So he had never told me that directly, but he and I have talked about you a couple of times. So that makes perfect sense, connecting those dots.
I was like, man, that is so awesome. So now he's doing, editing for me and stuff. And I love to hear that. So yeah. So to your point, I mean, it can be anything. It can be video editing, creating thumbnails. I mean, it can be running errands for people. I mean, there's just so many ways to carve your own path and make a business out of something out there today that just wasn't there, years ago at scale like it is, and for people to do, or buy something, take it over, create a YouTube channel, and you can earn income off YouTube channels. I'm working on mine as an experiment to show people what you can do. And when I get it to where I want to get it, I'm going to reveal, that and show that business model so that people can see, hey, you can start a YouTube channel, and I'm going to have, hey, here's how long it took. Here's what I did. And here's what it does, and those types of things. And, everything I do is kind of experimental these days, just to show other people, hey, here's what you can do. Here's how you can create businesses out of thin air with no money, but you have to educate yourself. I talk about education a lot. And, I mean, college, that's important, and if you're an academic, bent type of mindset personality, do that, get as much formal education as you can, but you got to educate yourself beyond that constantly, continually for the rest of your life. Never stop learning. And I'm always every day consuming, learning, educating, and that's how you stay ahead of yourself. So you have to be an expert at something. So if you want to buy a business, start a business, take over a business, you got to educate yourself first on, well, how do you even do that? What do you look for? Where? How do you negotiate it? What are the things you need to look for when you're doing your due diligence? What about the people running it? Are you going to run it? Those types of things. You're going to go out and consolidate a fragmented market and bring in, and roll that thing up. And then how are you going to finance it? How are you going to raise the capital? All that kind of stuff. So, you got to educate yourself. That's really where it starts. And there's tons of opportunities out there in environments like this, because some people they're just ready to, retire, and there's nobody coming up behind them. There's some people that maybe they're in trouble and they don't know how to get out of it. So you can take some expertise, come in, fix it, take the business over. There's a lot of different ways, creatively to get into businesses, whether they're, existing or closed or, out of business. And we're going to see a lot of that happening as we go through the recession.
Yeah. The other thing I think about this crisis that I want, again, a lot of folks, Greg, if you're under 40, you really haven't experienced a true recession or bear market. Sure, you experienced the 4-week recession of March 2020, but that was a V-shaped recovery. I think it's important for people to realize that this recession is going to be the bottom is not going to be a V, probably won't even be a U. It's going to take the bottoming process on this one. It's going to take time. Is that fair to say?
Yeah. I mean, a lot of people think we're there now. They're calling for bottoms now in crypto and stock markets and real estate and all that. And, we haven't even started. We're still, I mean, the Fed, again, hasn't really even done anything. I think they were still buying MBS last month,
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. So, I mean, we haven't started QT yet. We haven't raised rates, like some people like Kathy Wood will say where we came from to where we are now is 5X, and that's huge, but it's still really relatively nothing compared to where they need to go and what they need to do. And this is a global thing, which hasn't been the case before.
Yeah.
So, this world is globally connected on a macro level, and everybody's experiencing the same thing all around the world right now. It's very different time.
Yeah. So again, as I've often said, right, the definition, the joke or the story, the difference between a recession and a depression is when you lose your job, and a recession is when your neighbor loses their job. I want people to realize if you're going through something today, neither Greg or I wish that on anyone. If we could do anything to help move forward, or I'm sure we would, but there will be a lot of pain felt. There always is. I unfortunately believe this party or recession or whatever you want to call it is going to be, I'll say it right now, this one could be the worst of my adult life. And I consider the .com crash my first baptism by fire, where I lost 80% of my stack. The Great Recession was extremely painful because I was in the real estate business, which was real estate oriented. I think this one could be the largest macro pain because, again, inflation is not transitory. It is very sticky, right? They always talk about headline and core. inflation headline, I think the divergence between headline and core is only going to grow. Last week, PCE reported the largest delta of 1.6% between headline and core that we've had in 22 years. And I think it gets worse. Why? Headline, what you and I do, food, rent, gas, heating, all that stuff is stripped out of core. And
yeah, it's interesting. And, so there's some people calling for, a depression, like a Great Depression kind of environment. Now, I'm not so sure I agree that that is possible in this country, where you have soup lines and bread lines and things like that, where you have that much economic destruction. But, I don't even know what technically defines a depression. Maybe it's 20% negative GDP or something.
It's 3 years of 12 quarters of negative GDP growth and a cumulative drop in GDP of 10%.
Okay, 10%, that's the number. So, that's a deep, deep recession, right? So when you hear depression, a lot of people think, man, Great Depression. And yeah, I just don't think I don't think we'll see something like that again, because there's, so many things that you just need and have to have in the way we work and the way the world is connected these days. I mean, you would have to have just demand just completely fall off a cliff and people stop eating. And, I just don't think that is possible like it was then. I mean, there's so many people now and so many things that you need just on a daily basis to survive, like we saw in the pandemic. We saw what types of businesses would survive a complete economic Armageddon, situation. And, food and clothing and shelter and the things that you need to operate day to day. So the world will still keep going around versus, what happened back then. I didn't even know what employment was back then, 20-30% unemployment rate.
I think so. The Great Depression, I think, peaked at 27% unemployment, which again still means 73% employed. I mean, it's always two sides of the same coin.
Yeah. So very different environment right now. I mean, anything's possible, but I don't know how probable something like that is versus just a deep recession where, maybe unemployment hits 10% at some point, and you've got things like that. So that I think is more likely than a depression type situation.
Yeah, I think it is very likely that we have 4 quarters of negative GDP growth this year, probably next year. But frankly, we got to rip the Band-Aid off. And I believe, as we'll talk about in the 4th video, the Fed pivot, I think the Fed has more of a backbone than they've had before. But so instead of getting into that now, we'll do that in video 4. Greg, where can people find you?
GregDickerson.com, and I'll see you on video number 4.
Thank you.